Welcome everyone to the topic Introduction to HAZCOM or Hazardous Communication. So we will be talking about what to communicate in terms of hazardous materials or resources while handling and so on and so forth. Precautions to be taken care for. The requirement, why we are doing this particular topics. So basically seven major elements of globalized harmonized system aligned towards classification. We are talking about the logos, the pilferages, the system of informing candidates. Are these are things that comes around it? So, what are the thing? For foremost thing, there are 16 safety data sheets (SDS) that we are talking about. We'll be talking about the labels, we'll talk about the signal words, we talk about the hazard statement as in what all things that needs to be taken care of, or what will happen in if you are not doing the precautionary things, the pictorial representation that I'll definitely go around it, and the training required. So basically it will be giving a brief idea as to what HAZCOM is all about it. And most of the things have been taken from OSHA's thing, occupational safety hazard analysis. So let us understand hazard communication standards. First and the foremost thing, labels and labels. They should be labeled every time anything walks into your premises. It should not be defaced, definitely. Maintain a standard data sheet or safety data sheets that we want to classify or we want to nominate. If not received, ensure that you want to have it. Absolutely insist on having those things. As to safety data sheet, what are the requirements? Ensure chemicals in the workplace are properly tagged, properly labeled, properly marked, properly displayed, and so on and so forth. Provide information, provide training to the employees as to utilization or usage of the hazardous materials are concerned. We are talking about multi-employers workplaces, for employees, anything that comes around it. Where is multi-employer, wherein there is a transit node that happens from employer 1 to employer 2. There is a resource material who is sourcing it to you from the vendor, and the resources you are incorporating in your daily usage or end product, as the case might be. So you are a manufacturer out here. So we have the vendor and we have the manufacturer. So these are the multiple nodes that comes around it, which needs to be taken care for. Develop, implement, and maintain a written hazard communication. So let us understand the employer responsibilities, how hazard communication works around it. For chemical manufacturer, classifying the chemicals, the hazards, the products they import, and properly labeling them is a must. Safety data sheets is a definite for the classification. Please understand, chemicals are shipped to the employers by chemical manufacturers, importers, and distributors. This is what is very important. Now, when you come with an implementation of the program, all the employers receives is a label container. They don't want to see it around it, right? So safety data sheet with the shipped chemical that comes around it. Employers must prepare a written hazard documentation, as in what all chemicals are there in your premises, in your workplace. Employers must ensure that all containers are labeled. Definitely yes. Data sheets are maintained. Definitely yes. And employees are properly trained. Please keep the information up to date as relevant as possible. Talking about the written programs for hazard communication, which needs to be developed, written as per the rules of the game or properly to the environment or the culture that the company is working in. Main intent is to ensure compliance. This is what we are looking into it, with the standards, with the laws of the land, that coordinates with everything, and everybody is becoming very transparent altogether. So components, what are the components of the written program, as in the hazard program we go about it? First and foremost thing is to mention all the hazardous element present in the primary. Ensure that the safety data sheets are there to access for all the employees or the vendors or anybody who walks into it. Labeling of the containers is a must thing, and we cannot overlook or underestimate the importance. So hazard communication program. What are the list of chemicals that we go around it? We need to understand the common name, the product name, and the chemical name. These three things should be known to everybody. Remember, product name and the common name is most common thing. The common name might be in the language of the vernacular of the employees. Product name, the brand name that we are talking about it, and the chemical name is the scientific name that we usually associate with. So same as the safety data sheets and labels are all about concerning. We need to maintain an inventory, definitely yes. Cover all chemicals in any form, whether contained or not. Always keep it a protective lid. Always keep it in a restricted access area. Include chemicals, containers, pipe, and those generated over a period of work condition, over a period of a thing. So we'll talk about the safety data sheets. There are 16 section format, of which I still remember. As far as my memory goes, it's a 4 sheet that is very, very critical for hazard programs. We need to have, remember, these 16 section format or the SDS, the safety data sheet should be made available to each employee in the workflow, in the shop floor. All the chemicals needs to be nomenclated. They should be named, and if available, give the do's and don'ts out there. So safety data sheets, it's to be a designated person responsible and probably for maintaining and producing that sheet. Describe how it has been maintained, how the employees can access it, procedures if a safety data sheet is not received with first shipment. Must, absolutely must, for the data sheets to be available by each members, each chemical trained workers that is there. We need to have an access. So let us come to the 16 section format thing. Section 1 is all about identification. Remember, section 2 is about hazard identification. Section 3 tells me the ingredients, the individual ingredient or present in the composition, the information thereby. The first aid measures is what is mentioned by section 4. Section 5, in cases of fire exigencies, what is going to be taken place, what are the measures that we are looking into it. Next would be an accident release or leakages. What happens if such things happen, any leakages, any misuse, any accidental incident happens around it. The handling and the storage will be dealt in section 7. In section 8 we'll talk about the PPEs, personal protection equipment, and the control that becomes around it. Did I say 4 things are to be regulated by OSHA? This is section 12, 13, 14, and 15. Let us finish the normal thing as far as the SDS is concerned. Now, in section 9, the physical and chemical properties, the ingredients thereabout. Section 10 would be about stability, about reactivity. 11, the toxicologically information. So toxicological information is must, and probably the section 16 or any other precautionary measures that needs to be taken care for. So, section 12, the OSHA regulated occupational safety and hazard analysis regulated thing are all about encapsulated in 12, 13, and 14 and 15 sections only, which demarcates ecological information, disposal consideration, transport information, and the regulatory information. Again, I remember ecological, disposal, transportation, and regulatory information. This is a must thing that needs to be known to all people, all employees who are dealing with hazard. Now, I'll give some certain pictograph for you people to understand as an example of what exactly would be an SDS is all about it. We can have various sections that have been given around whatever I've been saying it out. It's the company identification, where have you sourced it, who are there, the SDS number, it is a fuel description, it's a version that comes around it. Similarly, with section 2, if you remember, we were talking about the hazard identification, what are the pictographical. People might not have the tenacity to read everything, but probably they will be generally sensitized if they see the pics which is mentioned out here and the word signal needs to be done around. So labeling. All containers of hazardous materials must be labeled. Definitely, it should be an immediate warning. Snapshot of an hazardous protection environment information has to be done, and labeling is a must. Is a must in a shop floor, which is to be incorporated. If you don't label it, it should not be entering in your premises in the first itself. Documenting for the labeling thing. What are the documentation thing? First, you have to have a responsible person who has to make compliance with all the labeling factor. Describe alternative to labeling of stationary process, the containers. Ensure all work containers are labeled and labeled appropriately. Should be distinguished, should be easily readable, should be easily identifiable. You must not have to strain your eyes to go through it. It should be properly and boldly mentioned out there. Label included trainings, shipping, and workforce. Containers are a must. We are talking about the procedures for reviewing, updating workplace labels, information, and so on and so forth. This is what is required for documentation for the label purposes. Let us understand what are the requirements for the shipping labels. Now here we have to give, I've just given you a sample shipping labels altogether. What is the thing? First thing is the nat is name, a for address, and t for telephone number for the shipping purposes itself, from where it has been dispatched to whom it has been dispatched. The product identifier has to be given, the signal word, the hazard statement. We need to mention everything. The precautionary statement is very important. This is what is the precautionary statement that we talk about it. uh, how to handle with the clear, and the pictograph that comes around it. We have a pictograph. Please understand, the hazard statement is the crux of what actually is being shipped around here, and we need to have the information. So what are we going to have? The address, the product identifiers, the signal word, the hazard statement, the precautionary statement, pictograph. Let us now come, let us understand that this hazardous material has already reached a designated place at the workplace. What it can be done, the employees can create their own labeling system, so that the people are very much aware of what material they are handling around it. It can be done in the vernacular languages they've required. So the language the local people prefer to work for employees can choose the same label required by the shipping containers. Can, mind you, this is an optional thing, or they can do it as long as any labels as they are very akin to altogether. Most importantly, training is a must. Training absolutely is a must. Remember that we're looking into it. So what is training requirements? First and the foremost thing, the employees working on the hazardous chemical in the work area should be aware of what exactly has been done before initial assignment. What we are looking into it, where we are providing anything special or not. Non-routine tasks need to be informed around it. Now, training includes observations, determining in presence, release of chemical in work area, hazards of chemical, appropriate protective measures. That is all about a PPE that we are talking about. It personal protection equipment needs to be very very clearly mentioned out there, and where and how to obtain the additional information as in the training is concerned. These should encapsulate the point. Types of label. Now we have the hazard communication standards, shipping labels that needs to be done around it. We have already given you an example. If you go to my previous part of this presentation, then we have the National Fire Protection Act that we go around it, when there are 704 labels that comes around it. HMIS is hazard material identification systems, which we actually go around it. We need to go absolutely. Department of Transport shipping labels, placarding and marking that comes around it, and this depends. Now people from people to people, region to region, government to government, there might be other classification, but these are the most famous classification that comes around it, which is hazard communication standards. We are talking about the HMIS, or hazard material identification standard, as the case may be. Then we are talking about how to go around the shipping labels. Now, a sample label, I've already said it to you. The precautionary statement has been mentioned out here. The direction for use is to be given. The pictograph is to be given. The danger stuff or the crux of the material needs to be taken about it, and the supplier identification, the product identification. So that is what has been mentioned out here. We give the product identifier, the signal word, the hazard statement, the precautionary statement, the pictograph, the NAT or the name, address, telephone number. Example for your eyes to go around it, and if you look into it, we are providing everything, the pictograph, the product identifier, the signal word, or the crux or the gist of the thing, the hazard statement that comes around it, the precautionary statement, what are the things that needs to be done in case of certain leakages, certain spillage, certain things that might happen. So if we look it into it, we are mentioning everything about the address of the responsible fellow, how the hazard material has been identified. This is what go around it. We are not only talking about this thing, we are also talking about the severity of the hazard in terms of danger. Is more severe, warning for less severe, and so on and so forth. Pictograph conveys the specific information about the hazards of a chemical in a symbol. This is what we are interesting upon it. I am ensuring that all my viewers watching this particular video will be able to understand what is required for HCS label element. HCS is hazard communication standard level that we come across it. Now let us come to the pictograph, and I will discuss all the pictograph one by one. Let us talk about the health hazard, what it happens around it. Is it carcinogenic? Is it mutagenicity? It is reproductive toxicity. What can it is it does it hamper your lungs or respiratory organ? Does it target any other particular organs? Primarily your eyes, your ears, and aspiration toxicity. That is what we are talking about it in terms of health hazard. Let us come to the flame, where the fire is the thing, where it is, are you containing or are you transporting flammable objectives or flammable material. Is it pyrophoric? Is it combustible? Is it self-heating? Is it emitting flammable gas? Self-reactive, organic, parasite that we talk about it. Then comes the explanation marks. Probably might be an irritant to your skin, your eyes. Are you skin sensitive? Is it acute toxicity? Is it narcotic in effect? Does it gives you a heady feeling? Do you get unconscious? Probably respiratory tract irritant, hazardous nodes. Now, what I'm trying to tell it to you is giving you every pictograph that is mentioned out here. We'll talk about the gas cylinder. Let us understand if it is a compressed gas that we are transporting. And when I say it need not be an LPG or CNG or liquefied petroleum gas or compressed natural gases, it can be pure oxygen also. Remember, even pure oxygen, if not handled clearly, is very, very combustible. So we are talking about corrosions in terms of skin corrosion, burns, eye damages, corrosive to material. We will be talking about the exploding bombs, explosive self-reactives, organic peroxide. We are talking about combustible elements that has been we now come back to the flame over cycle. We tell about oxidizer. Did I say oxygen thing that we coming around it? Did I say there are certain material which in the event of exposing to the air or the atmosphere becomes combustible altogether? For example, sulfur. We have the environment non-mandatory requirement, as in aquatic toxicity. Is it water soluble and things like that? Skull and crossbone things is acute toxicity that we are looking at in terms of things. The environmental toxicity probably not been regulated by OSHA, but skulls and bones definitely is. So here we come across again back to the same level as the example of hazard levels element. We are seeing about what exactly the hazard statement is. It flammable? Is it what? Is it extremely flammable? Is it you need to say it out, and so that there are certain keywords which will get registered in the minds of the users. Now we talk about the precautionary statement, which recommends that this should be prevented. These are the things that needs to be taken. These are the steps that needs to be taken in case of some untoward accident happening for duty, probably because of improper storage or improper and so on and so forth. So requirement at the workplace, same information as that has been mentioned in the manufacturer label or the product identifiers. Everything should be of same thing. May include sign, placards, process sheets, batch tickets, operation procedures, other material altogether. So now we come back to the alternative work labels. Now, what are the alternative work labels? The work labels which are very much understandable by the employees and the workers out there must provide general information. Absolutely ground level information that people can able to dissect altogether. Hazard warnings, health programs, HCS, and probably what we are looking into it in terms of hazard material identification system. Now let us talk about the NFPA. Is the National Fire Protection Agency's 704. What does it goes about it? Overall diamond shape made up of four smaller things, and I will, believe me or not, elaborate on this graph that has been mentioned out here. What exactly has been mentioned? Why do we go around it? So each smaller diamond is a yeah. So here is the J factor. Like this is splash guggers. and gloves and apron and dust vaporizer has to be with it. So every time there's a J, this needs to be done with the splash logos and things like be worn around it. Now, Department of Transportation of the shipping containers gives me the marking, the labels, and the placarding. Remember, this is what has been a graphic element that has been mentioned. Square on point on the placard. It's a square on point having a background on a various colors. Where shipping container is also a container used for workplace. We'll talk about the classification in terms of transportation. Basically, class that we go around it. So communication labels one by one, if you look into it, I'm just giving you an example in terms of labels, in terms of placard, in terms of markings. Now this, remember, is a marking altogether. We are talking about the placards which has been mentioned and the labels thereby which has been given out here. So, Department of Transportation markings. This is a classification which tells you, if you see it down, these are all pictograph oriented. So, with a glance, you can come to know as what kind of materials you are doing around it. A little four would be letting tell you as in class one explosive, class two gases, class three flammable. It tells you of everything here. Similarly, for warning labels, it's a similarly identical field that comes around it. Believe me or not, you will come to know whether kind of material of gases, combustible, fuel oil, flammable, which what are you carrying it out. Again, believe me or not, safety begins with communication. If you want to be safe, you should be properly informed. The Department of Transportation hazard markings are being mentioned out here as an example. We'll talk about the inhalation hazard that comes around it. We have an overpack with which is been mentioned for you to understand together. Examples here, what I've been trying to tell it to you is a similar way than example that has been given. What will happen, as in if you swallow it, call the doctor, rinse them out, is a global harmonized system of classification which tells around it, gives me the address, gives me a proxy telephone number. So basically, wash hand, face through, handling harmful if swallowed. So there is certain things that been comes around it. Batch number tells me the date and so on and so forth. So it tells me everything about the hazard thing. What is the hazard statement? Another example that has been confirmed with the pictograph that comes around it, the statement which is there, it is going to cause respiratory problem, may cause cancer, is an inflammable gas thing. What are the precautions that needs to be taken? That you should not actually smoke, store in a tightly closed container, and so on and so forth. What happens in case, whom to call, which doctors to relate to, who is the specialist looking into it. So locating information probably in a box, in a jar, wherever you got to go around, has to be the. So hazard identification should be maintained as per the classification. Remember that thing. That's the precautionary thing that we goes around it. Initial care instruction for untrained individual who has been exposed to the chemical, and recommendation is for personal protection equipment. Always, this is one thing which you should never compromise altogether. So we have the section identification hazard and the first aid measure. First aid measure is your personal protection equipment. So this will come to an end of this particular presentation. Thank you for watching this video.